On the first day of class, she was treated differently just because of her gender. The professor asked the class a question, and Ruth was the first to raise her hand. But the professor skipped right over her and picked a boy who raised his hand later. That boy got the answer wrong. Ruth raised her hand again, and the professor glanced at her name and still chose another boy sitting in the back. Ruth wanted to give up, but the more she listened to the boys' answers, the more wrong they sounded. So she raised her hand again. The professor was a bit surprised and finally called on her. She stood up confidently and answered, explaining everything in proper legal terms. A boy behind her wasn't convinced and tried to argue with her, but Ruth had already spotted his mistake and corrected him. Seeing the professor's satisfied expression, Ruth knew she got it right. This was Harvard Law School in 1956, and among over 500 incoming students, there were only 9 women, including Ruth. Back then, becoming a lawyer as a woman was nearly impossible, so they weren't treated kindly at all. Discrimination was everywhere. At the welcome dinner for new students, the dean made the 9 women stand up one by one and introduce themselves. And he asked them this question:
"And why you're occupying a place at Harvard that could have gone to a man?"
All the women in the room were embarrassed and uncomfortable. They'd gotten in on their own merit, yet somehow they were being treated like thieves. The first woman said her father was a lawyer, and she hoped to help with his work one day. The dean was somewhat satisfied with that answer. Then it was the second woman's turn. She said she didn't want to be limited by marriage and wanted to become a lawyer, but the dean cut her off before she even finished.
"That's not a very good reason. Next."
The dean's attitude made Ruth furious, and then it was her turn.
My husband Marty is in the second year class. I'm at Harvard to learn more about his work, so I can be a more patient and understanding wife.
Her answer was dripping with sarcasm, and the dean's face went dark. No one could have imagined that this petite woman would one day turn a country full of gender discrimination into one that values equality. But her path toward that dream was full of obstacles. Not long after Ruth started school, her husband was diagnosed with cancer, with a 95% fatality rate. It was devastating for the loving couple. Even though hope was slim, Ruth refused to give up. She wanted to hold on to that 5% chance. From that day on, after finishing her own classes, she rushed to her husband's classroom to take notes for his second-year courses. Back home, she was even busier. She had to go over all the lectures again with her sick husband, then type up his assignments for him, all while taking care of their baby daughter. By the time she finished everything, it was already midnight. Only then did she have time to work on her own studies. What seemed impossible to others, she pushed through with sheer determination. Thankfully, hard work paid off. Thanks to Ruth's effort, her husband recovered, graduated from Harvard, and landed a lawyer job in New York. And Ruth's studies weren't affected at all. She remained at the top of her class. To take care of the family, she applied to transfer to Columbia University to continue pursuing her dream of becoming a lawyer. In 1959, she graduated from Columbia University at the top of her class. With a law degree from one of the best schools in the world, she should have easily gotten hired by a top law firm. But in reality, she interviewed at 3 different firms and got rejected by every single one. And the reasons were ridiculous. You should apply to be a secretary, not a lawyer. You'll be too busy with housework to be efficient. Women are too emotional, and even this one.
Other wives, they get jealous.
With every excuse, Ruth realized just how little women were valued in the workplace. Even with her elite education and top grades, the only thing that mattered was that she was a woman, and that alone was enough to reject her. Helpless, Ruth became a law professor instead, placing her dream in the hands of future generations. Time flew by, and 11 years passed. She kept doing her best as a professor, a wife, and a mother, and her attentive husband noticed everything. One day, he handed her a special tax case to look into. Ruth had no idea that this case would change her life and the entire United States. Follow me, next part is even better.